and welcome to Culture Chat, a show designed to stimulate discussion about culture, communication, and diversity within the United States. I am a co-host, Dr. Marquita Bird, and my partner is
Professor Arjun Bakshi.
And today, we are going to take our discussion to religious intolerance. We've talked about other kinds of diversity issues. Religion is a topic that people kind of shy away from. We don't want to discuss it. In fact, we're taught that when you first meet someone, one of the three topics that you never talk about is politics, sex, and religion. And we're going to tackle it today. We're going to be brave and talk about religion and our intolerance, some intolerance of different religions in the United States and worldwide.
Absolutely, and of course, before we get too far into it, it's important to think about why this is important. It's because people are persecuted very often for the religious belief that they do have, and this includes what we call hate crimes.
Right.
And so it is something that happened recently. To give an anecdotal example, where a couple and and one family member in part of Michigan, I could be wrong, were shot to death by a neighbor, allegedly over parking spots. But they were a Muslim, the three people that died. And the person, of course, was not Muslim, the person that shot them. And so it created a lot of stir within the community about the tightly held prejudices towards certain religious communities in the country.
So that is problematic for us here in the United States. And we ask the question again, why do we care? We care because everybody's religious freedom is at risk when we allow any group to be discriminated against or harmed because of their religion. So it protects all of us. It protects all of us.
Absolutely. And of course, let's get to terminology. What is religion? So religion is a codification of one's beliefs in a higher power, where somebody comes, we create traditions over time to understand why does a thing happen, why does a universe exist, why do people exist, what is our purpose in life, and so over time, scriptures or documents that people see as truth, right, are created in different communities. Yes. And of course, the three closely related religions, the Abrahamic religions, are prime examples, where you have Christianity and its various sects, you have Judaism, which also has a variety of beliefs within the religion, and then you have Islam, which also has many different varieties. And then, of course, outside of those three central religions, which occurred sort of around the same time, then you have, of course, Hinduism, and then you have Buddhism, which again have a common root in the scriptures that they believe in. And then you have others that are by different names known. One is, of course, Wicca, and then another one is animism, and then there are simply others that are, shall we say, nature oriented. So, for example, it may be worth mentioning that even in the country of India, somebody once asked me, like, how many gods are there? Because the joke is, well, there's so many Hindu gods, how many are there? And the answer, very unhumorously, I would say, is infinite. And the reason being that any one person might see a form of power and say, this to me is a representation of the higher power. It could be the sun, it could be a tree or a type of tree, it could be an animal, it could be a living person. Whatever they see as a representation of the power of the universe in their mind becomes to them God.
Yes.
And so a quick side note, some people say, well, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual.
Yes,
this is a very good distinction to make. So when people are calling themselves spiritual, what they usually mean is my life has less ritual in it, it may have less rites and very structured activities in it, and in some cases may not involve group worship or a text in the middle of their life, but they still maintain to some extent a belief in a higher power, and I would argue still some association to a particular religion, which will be then defined by how they bury their dead and what their rites are for birth and marriage. So that being said, now we have a better idea of what religion might include, but then let's get back to our main theme. What is religious intolerance?
Well, religious intolerance has to do with behaviors that we engage in things that we say, policies that we develop, laws that discriminate against people based on their religious beliefs. It's as simple as that. And we talk about hate crimes. Hate crimes have to do with violence that are visited upon people based on their religion. And it could be violence against them physically, or it could be violence against them, their property, their homes, their places of worship. All of those things come into religious intolerance. We can talk about 4 different types of religious intolerance. The first is interfaith intolerance, where people from different faiths, like Christians and Islam, may be intolerant of each other and discriminate against each other. So that's an issue. It could be intra-faith within a particular religion, and they discriminate against each other. For example, many mainline Christians discriminate against Mormons.
Yes.
And Christianity simply means anybody who believes in Christ and follows the way, which Mormons do. But mainline Christians will say, "Oh, they're a cult."
Right,
Yeah.
and just to quickly interject, let's not forget the not so long ago the conflict in Ireland between Catholics and Protestants, which was
Yes,
long
yes,
running.
yes.
And these are, shall we say, mainline interpretations of Christianity,
Right,
but
right.
there was such bad blood.
Yes, and in fact, I bring up ancient history for my students, and that is John F. Kennedy running for president. The first time we had a Catholic person to run for president, there was a lot of opposition to him, and he had to make speeches and talk about that often, that though I may be Catholic, I'm not trying to change the country to be Catholic. I'm running for the president of the United States. So we see this kind of prejudice. And then there's prejudice between faith communities and the secular, people who are not religious, and sometimes people who belong to mainline religions are very critical. Oh, you don't believe in God? That sort of thing, and there's discrimination there, and then there's discrimination among the people who are not religious and the religious communities. So we're all stuck. We can get stuck into our own religious stance, and then we want to ridicule other people. We want to discriminate against them. We want to take away their human rights.
Right, and sometimes it helps to put it in, well, how does this affect my personal life? I think
Yes.
one context that has been hotly debated for at least, I think, half a century is prayer in schools. And so as a person growing up in India, I was a Hindu boy going to a Christian school, and in a largely Muslim-dominated town.
Wow.
So this was a very different,
Yeah.
way of living. But here's the funny thing. So when we had morning prayer in school, it was what is known as the Lord's Prayer, our Father who art in heaven. Many of the viewers may know this one.
Yes.
So here's the strange thing, though. They took out the last line, which was our Lord Jesus Christ. So they took out that line.
Okay.
Any explicit reference to Jesus or Christianity was removed from all our different
Okay.
prayers. But they were still the Christian prayers.
Yes.
And you could not be a administrator in our school unless you were Christian.
Really?
And we had a chapel, a beautiful engraved chapel. And so once a year, I volunteered to do Christmas carols. But here's the funny thing. I never became Christian. I always maintained my own identity. And so for me to understand the concept that there's not just a fight over what prayer is appropriate for school, but rather prayer at all being appropriate. It took me some time, but I do understand, because here we are talking about a acceptance of a mandate by an
Yes.
institution.
Yes.
And
yes.
I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
Right. Of course, I grew up in a time period where we had morning prayer school. And so I mourn the loss of being able to do that on one hand, but on the other hand, I realized that where I went to school, everybody was Christian. But now we have students who are Muslim, Islam, we have people who are Wicca, we have people who are just spiritual, and so we have all these different religions, and to have state mandated prayer in the schoolroom, that's problematic because it doesn't recognize all of our students, and it forces them to pray to a God that they may not believe in. Now, here's the thing where people have a misunderstanding. taking prayer out of the public school doesn't mean children can't pray in school. That's not what it means. It means that the principal can't lead it, the teacher can't lead it. But if there are groups of students who want to get together and pray, nobody's going to come and throw them out of school because they're somewhere praying. Or if an individual person wants to sit at their desk and pray, nobody's going to come and throw their child out of school. That's the thing we need to remember. We're talking about state mandated and things that are forced, but nobody is saying you cannot pray at school. So if you want to be real about it, you take responsibility for your religious life and recognize that you can pray wherever you are, or not to wherever you are.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I think we're pointing out, basically a very interesting, dialectic here between those people that have a faith and those that are professing not to have faith at all. To give you a quick statistic, it seems to be a rising number of people that profess to have no faith or no religion at all, and it's of dispute whether these people would even identify as spiritual. And so this is, over the years, increased from 5, 10 to now more like 15, 17, 18%. More and more people are calling themselves non-faith or outside of faith. And I think perhaps we could talk really quickly about what happens when one group is dominant in a given context and it oppresses the other, or then in a different context, the tables are turned. So what might happen here, and I think you and I both have some thoughts on this, when a non-faith group is the dominant and the person of faith is the minority in a situation?
Oh, wow. That's a new way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
You're right. Being in a secular segment and a person who has religion can be frightening if you or people ridicule you about having faith. This incident that happened to me has nothing to do with religion, but it shows how you respond when you were the only one in a group, and it harkens back to an issue that has been going on recently about Old Dixie, the song Old Dixie, which is an anthem of the Confederacy. I was in a bar in Texas one time, and I was the only black person in the bar, and a lot of people were in there. And for some reason, they started singing Dixie. And nobody was looking at me, but I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, they're singing Dixie, and I'm a black person in here. Wow, what does this mean? Am I going to, is somebody going to attack me or whatever? And I can think about a child who's sitting in a classroom, or a person who's a religious person in a secular group, but you're the only one. You're the person who's outside. How do I fit here? What will people think of me? Will they treat me equally? All those questions come up. So I like the way you put that.
Absolutely. And this can happen in small ways, folks. That it's the smallest thing to a person who does have faith to, let's say things like, oh, thank God, God is kind. Whatever is that some good thing happened in your life, or a crisis was averted, some sort of thing. And you, in maintaining your humility, you try to say, I was blessed by a higher power here. And so then what has happened is that, in my experience, if I ever say something like this, that many times I will get silence from the other side.
Yes.
They're kind, these friends and colleagues of mine, not to correct me. But then in another context, I might hear them having a discussion where they do express their views,
Yes.
and so I'll know where I stand. So at the same time, then, as a sort of courtesy, I then would want to restrain myself to some extent, and so then, but then this rift does begin. Because
Yes.
we aren't really allowed to talk about it, and I think that's probably what is the heart of the problem. We can't talk about it normally.
And I think even when we do talk about it, the fact that we ridicule each other about the differences, that's the issue. I'm okay with you not believing. I don't have any problem with that. But don't ridicule me because I do believe, or I won't ridicule you because you don't belong to organized religion. I won't say, oh, well, you really, don't have a spiritual life. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to hear what you're experiencing, what you're thinking, what you have to say about it, and try to grow, try to learn from it and be stimulated by it. So that's the issue, that we have these differences and we do silence each other. I talk about coming from the Midwest to California. and the South. In the Midwest and the South, at school where I taught, it was very common when we got new faculty or new administrators, somebody would invite them to church. And it wasn't come join my religion. This is where we socialize. This is the life of the community. Come meet my friends. And people would be perfectly fine with that for the most part. But when I got to California and I would, say that, people would go, well, what are they doing over there at your church? Or, no, I don't want to go. Or, why are you asking me? I'm insulted. And so I got that kind of stonewalling instead of saying, just saying, well, no, I don't think I would be interested. That's cool, But to people get hostile and angry about it.
I think I can actually explain why. When I first came to the U.S. and I was mingling with people who were Christian, didn't matter to me. Everybody's fine. But what I would find was that many times people would, try to use that sort of tactic to convert me. And so this is something that, people of faith sometimes need to consider, that, you're thinking you're doing the right thing. You're trying to, as the term goes in the Christian culture, to save someone, right? And so when a religion or religious belief focuses around converting other people to your type of faith, many times then you're putting people too much on their guard. And so then it's even less likely that they will have a moderate or a positive view of faith, regardless of what their belief is.
Well, right. Nobody wants to hear proselytization, whenever. But I'm just talking about inviting someone because that is my community. Now, you will see racial differences in terms of talking about religion. For example, among African Americans, I don't care where you go in the country, eventually somebody's going to say, do you have a church home? And that just means come on over to my church and meet my friends. Be a member of us. And some folks will say, well, no, and they'll be very polite. Well, I'm looking for one. And okay, don't do anything else about it. But among African Americans, pretty much people will say that. But we do tend to silence each other, whether we are in the same religion and we're in different denominations, we're in different religions, or I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic. I say I don't have enough information to know yes or no. We have to break down the barriers. I think that I would say that if you cannot stand scrutiny and if you cannot field questions and feel comfortable with having questions, then you need to really look at what your beliefs are.
Truly well.
Yeah. If you're atheist, that's cool, and or if you're agnostic or if you're Wicca, and by the way, Wicca means witchcraft, and witchcraft is a religion. But you got to know yourself well enough to be able to feel comfortable with getting questions. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes.
Absolutely. And so, folks, the simple takeaway, if we had to bring things to a close, I like what you said about whatever your belief is, if your belief is that there is no reason to have faith, even that should be something that you can hold comfortably in the face of somebody who is on the other side of you.
Yes.
And so what we would always say as people who love communication is that have that conversation. Share your thoughts with the other person. Understand theirs. They don't have to bring you over to their side, and you don't have to bring them to yours. We're all on the same side.
Yes.
And with that, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to hit subscribe, to like, and comment. Share this video. We are on Twitter at @CultureChatShow. Join us again for another Culture Chat.